on his way. He might, in fact, be on his way, but we'll get started because he's MIA as of now. I'm Jack Weiss. I'm joined by Dennis Zine. This is the Public Safety Committee meeting for Monday, February 9. Mr. Zine, there are several items that can be handled on consent, items 3 through 7. Tell me which of those you will consent to.
I only have a question on 6 and 7, just technical questions.
All right, so 3 through 5, Mr. Zine and I will move to the full council and recommend they be consented, or they be approved. Item 6, what's your technical question?
The question on number 6 is, there were the defibrillators. I see the representative from the fire department's here. The SWAT team of LAPD had defibrillators, the EMTs on SWAT, and I understand they were recalled to give to certain sections of the city. And the question is, were those given back to the SWAT team members who are EMTs? I think they had 18 or something, and they were recalled. And were they ever given back to the EMT SWAT team members?
No, the ones that were...
Introduce yourself. Your name, please.
My name is Valerie Munoz. I'm with the fire department. I'm a senior management analyst, and I run the PAD program. The 30 defibrillators that SWAT had
30.
were on loan for a year's time, and it's been over 2 years that they've had them. The stipulation was that they would find money to purchase defibrillators, but that hasn't happened yet. They're still working on it. I'm working with them. I'm taking 10 at a time. I took 10 in December. I'm taking 10 more in March. And the reason is I need them for the new stations for the police department.
I understand that, but the question was the police foundation or some other entity going to fund just the SWAT team members? I understand there's EMTs on the SWAT team.
Correct.
That can render aid immediately in the event of an incident with the device that, I don't know if they ever deployed it or not, but it's nice to have in case they do need it.
Right.
Did they ever come up with a plan to get those 30 replaced that are going to be recalled?
As far as I know, they're still working with the police foundation. And they said that they had a contributor that they were trying to get some money from, some personal entity, a sponsor type.
So the ones that are being removed are not being replaced at this particular time. So they're going to go from
Not
30
yet.
down to 20, and then after March they'll be down to 10.
Correct. I've only taken back 10 of them so far. And they're being used at the new Topanga station and the new Olympic station. They're being installed this month at those 2 stations.
And I understand the necessity to do that, but the other question I had is how are we going to give those back, because they were given them for a purpose, since they're trained EMTs and members of the SWAT team, and that device that's so important in the instance of a heart failure. Is there someone from the police department here? Harry? Are you aware of this?
No, I'm not. I'd be happy to check into it, report back to you.
The officer's name is...
I don't have any problem with the 90,000 from Kaiser Permanente that they're going to use for the defibrillators for the pools. My concern was that those SWAT team members that are EMTs, because I was approached by some SWAT team members when they were first notified that they were going to be removed. So if we could find out whether the foundation or some other entity, and how much are they a piece?
Roughly $1,200.
Okay. And they're Phillips, aren't they?
Yes, they are. And the stipulation is to SWAT that once they do acquire their own machines, we're going to absorb them into the PAD program and support them with batteries and pads.
From the fire department?
Yes.
And is there any other entity within the city of Los Angeles that has a separate program other than what the fire department has?
No, sir.
So the airport and all the other facilities come under your jurisdiction?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how many do we have citywide?
We have approximately 1,200,
Okay.
just under 1,200.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I just asked that if the police department can report back on how we can get those 30 replaced for the SWAT team EMT members for the critical function that they serve.
Okay, so we'll do that, but the item can go forward.
Yes, thank you.
Hey, Mr. Parks, that was item 6. Mr. Zine said he had a technical question. I was recommending consent for items 3 through 7. We were going to ask questions on 6 and 7. Are there any other items?
I have no questions other than on 7. But I
Okay, well, let's call 7, and then we'll go through the, you know what, actually, you're real, let's go through the agenda, then go through, and we'll just hold 7. Thank you for your question, answering the
Thank you.
questions on 6. 6, we will move forward.
And Harry's going to report back to this committee.
And so let's, we have the fire chief here. Let's, out of deference to the fire chief, let's call item 2 first, please, Mr.
Item 2, Fire Department reports and CO report relative to resources available for funding emergency medical services captain positions and related employee relations issues, and the placement of the upcoming fire department training class and any savings that may be achieved.
And I'll note that we have a card from Mr. McCosker from United Firefighters. Feel free to come forward, Mr. McCosker. And also, I don't know if anyone from the mayor's office wishes to be at the table, but you're welcome to be at the table. Chief Barrett.
Good morning. This issue has been kind of an ongoing issue for most of this budget year regarding 18 EMS captains that are resolution authorities. They were converted to resolution authorities at the beginning of the budget year, and the fire department had been asked to identify funding to maintain the 18 positions. In addition to that, during the year, a lawsuit was actually also put as part of our budget deficit, so we've been working to cover all those costs. We presented a plan approximately 2 weeks ago, I believe, to this committee as well as the Budget and Finance Committee. At that time, the CAO had not had the ability to basically confirm all the numbers, and they came back with their report. I do have a little bit of difference with their report, and primarily it has to do with on page 2, bullet point number 3 at the top. It talks about 5.7 million being the cap rate, and that's probably because I called it the cap rate, and I was corrected that it really isn't a cap. It's the additional revenue we'll be generating based on the services we provide to the port and the airport. The cap rate is a separate figure, it's something like 2.7, but that 5.7 is additional money because of the services, the increased revenue we're getting from services. So, having said that, to cover the cost of the EMS captains, we're requesting to utilize the 1.8 for closing the 1 drill tower class, the 1.5 for the charging to DWP for hydrant testing, as well as $140,000 from an equipment account that was identified earlier that's in your report. And that will cover the cost of the EMS captains as well as being able to maintain 4 variably staffed ambulances that are staffed by overtime. In addition to that, the 5.7 million, again, the increased revenue we're getting from the port and the airport would cover the 3.8 plus additional monies to the city for whatever purposes for the deficit that exists within the city.
Thank you. CEO and Mayor's office, and then we'll hear from Mr. McCosker.
I'm Mark Davis with the CEO's office. As you know, as part of the budget in 08, 09, it was proposed to cut these 18 EMS captains. Through the process, it was decided that we would restore the 18 captains unfunded, and through the FSR process, we would try to monitor what the status of the department's funds were to confirm that they could fund these things and see what the deficit or surplus for the department would be. Currently, the deficit for the department is at $6.3 million. The department has come forward 3 or 4 times with different types of packages. We have worked closely with the department to try to find ways to fund these 18 EMS captains. Most of the funding proposals they have brought forward have been one-time type funding for an ongoing for the ongoing 18 EMS captains. On January 9th, the fire department came forward to the Budget and Finance Committee with a proposal to fund 9 EMS captains and send 9 back to the field. Part of that package was to cut the variable staffed ambulances, and there was concern about those cuts. You know, one of the council members asked, you know, will that reduce the promised one ambulance in each of the fire stations that we had promised the community. That did not cut that, but that was something that held up us to move forward because that had not been confirmed. Several of the items, again, that the department has brought forward are one-time funding sources. The cap money that the chief had just said, the reimbursements for the hurricanes, we don't even expect that money to come in during this fiscal year. And now the 1.5 that they will be getting for the fire hydrant testing from DWP. So we went back to the January 9th memo that they had proposed. They had offered up to cut the 5th class. That's going to start the end of April. And instead of cutting ambulances, the funding for the 9 EMS captains now going back to the field to reduce constant staffing overtime, and the excess money that they had offered up from the equipment account. Those 3 items will fund the 18 EMS captains for the first 8 months, July 1st through end of February, and then send these the 9 other EMS captains back to the field for the final 4 months. And then this won't cut the ambulance services. That was one of the concerns of part of what they had offered in that January 9th.
If I could respond to that. A couple things. The CAO, again, with all due respect, mentioned about the on one-time versus ongoing costs. I just want to remind, when we had the budget deliberations last year, that the original plan was there was a motion by one of the council members to fund these positions through uncollected trash fee. That didn't materialize. I understand that's how things work. And that's where we got into the position of this one-time funding, because we were 2 or 3 months into the year, and now we had to determine a way to fund these positions for the balance of the year. As he did state, several times I presented packages of funding to cover the costs, and for one reason or another, as I reported this committee a couple of weeks ago, the money was directed to other parts of the fire department's budget that I personally did not have input to, and that took some of the money away. As far as the ambulances, I think it's not being very prudent if we retain ambulances that are staffed by overtime and eliminate positions. I think it makes, as I stated here when I was here before, the vital nature of the EMS captains are more important to me as the fire chief than having ambulances that are staffed by overtime. To retain overtime and eliminate positions, to me, is not very prudent. And also, it was mentioned about the 1.1 reimbursement from FEMA. That is not concluded as part of our proposal. We do expect to get that money this fiscal year, but we're not even including that in our proposal. Just in case that does not happen, we're not going to include that.
Mayor's office.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and council members. Celine Cordero with the Mayor's Public Safety Office. Just here on behalf of the Mayor to express support for the fire chief, and just to give you a quick minute or two of the history that our office has had in dealing with the fire department on this plan. Some months ago, maybe a couple of months ago, the chief and the mayor and our staff had a conversation about the importance of the EMS captains. And at that point, the chief made a very strong case to the mayor that these 18 captains were necessary to the public safety and service delivery for the city of Los Angeles. And at that point, the mayor said, bring us a plan to make sure you cover these 18 as well as any other deficits within your department. And I can say, because I've worked firsthand with the chief personally and staff over the last couple of months, the fire department has brought the mayor several different plans, different revenue sources and funding options, some of which could have worked, some of which may not have, and now we've come to the plan that we have put forth today. So the mayor's office and the mayor is comfortable with the plan that the chief has put forward to cover the EMS captains, to cover the current deficit, and to maintain the services that the chief feels are necessary.
One last comment. The plan that we are proposing will not only cover the EMS captains, but those ambulances as well. I think that's an important point to bring out, that it will cover both. So the ambulances will retain, as well as the EMS captains for the balance of this fiscal year.
Mr. McCosker?
Thank you. Pat McCosker, President, United Firefighters of Los Angeles City, Local 112. I've been concerned all along, 2 months back in office here, that this discussion about EMS district captains has been a little bit too much about money and not enough about public safety. And I know we're here this morning at a Public Safety Committee meeting. But since we're talking about money, let me just very briefly say, and I'll say a lot more tonight when the Budget and Finance Committee discusses this, but let me just very briefly say that I'm concerned that our budget isn't being treated fairly. And what I mean by that is we're being debited with issues, one-time, by the way, expenditures, issues that we ought not to be debited with, like lawsuits, and then the same logic isn't applied. We're not being, or allowed to be, it sounds like, credited with money that we ought to have coming back, for instance, from the federal government for the hurricane response that we provided, that kind of reimbursement. So I'd like to see fairness applied. I think when you do that, our budget is absolutely in the black in this plan that has both one-time revenues, acknowledged, also one-time expenses, and every budget does. We all know that every budget has one-time revenues year after year after year, that we remain in the black and we actually put money back in the general fund and are able to keep all the ambulances open and the EMS district captains all in position this budget year. And by the way, I agree with the fire chief that the best model or the best way of staffing ambulances is not on overtime. That's why I've always lobbied for the conversion of those V-staffed, as we call them, ambulances, conversion of those to full-time, fully staffed 24-hour ambulances, because the truth is we need those ambulances in those districts as much at night as we do during the day, and for another quarter of the price, if you will, you can fund them for 24 hours rather than for just 12 hours. So that's what we need to do. We need those ambulances bad. Our ambulances are stretched very, very thin. But our EMS district captains are that important, as the fire chief has said. Yesterday I worked at Fire Station 101 in San Pedro. The very first thing we had in the morning was a medical call. We got on scene. We determined that we needed, according to our policy, if you don't mind if I continue, thank you. We needed to have an EMS district captain respond to the call. And it was for the reason of liability, really, more than anything else, not for the expertise they provide when they're managing our most critical incidents.
General nature.
Without giving away too much privacy, it was a psych call, a psych patient. And we needed to have a supervisor there. Just like the police, by the way, needed to have a police supervisor there. And you understand the importance of those. We had both on scene. It was a rarity that we didn't have the battalion assigned EMS district captain available that day. So we got the next closest, which will be the thing that happens every day repeatedly if we lose 9 EMS district captains. It took 25 minutes to get the next closest, because they're spread out geographically. Each battalion has one.
You all had to sit and wait.
We sat and waited, as did the psych patient, and it was very unpleasant, more unpleasant for the patient than for us, let me tell you. But it took 25 minutes to get the next closest EMS district captain there. I couldn't help but think, as we returned to quarters and talked about it, that it wasn't too many months prior to that and too many blocks from there that we had a balcony collapse, a multi-casualty incident with about 20 adults on a wooden balcony that gave way at a party at night, where we had critically injured patients, broken bones, and a real quagmire to deal with, a real difficult incident to deal with. But we had the EMS district captain in our battalion there, and they're just seconds behind us. He took command of the incident, provided the expertise that these EMS district captains provide. He made sure the patients were properly treated, properly triaged, properly transported, communicated with the hospitals, did all those things that they do when they command our our EMS division at an incident like that one. And I'm convinced that lives were saved and limbs were saved as well because of the work of that EMS district captain. So my point is, let's don't make it a regular event that we have 25-minute responses from our EMS district captains. Let's keep them geographically spread out through the city, one to each battalion, just like we promised the taxpayers when we put our 5-year EMS plan in place. And I urge your support of our continued funding of EMS captains and of the ambulances that we have.
Thank you, Mr. McCosker. Questions?
I have a couple of questions for the representative from the City Administrative Office. It states in the report from the City Administrative Office that the department's projecting a $6.3 million deficit of which 3.875 million is attributed to the Harold Ackley settlement. What department is penalized for a settlement? If the police department was penalized for a settlement, that would be severely impacting our public safety. I've never seen a report where we jeopardize the department for a settlement and take it out of their budget to pay the settlement. And that's what this is saying. Out of 6.3 million, you're going to jam them 3.8 million because of a settlement that was handed down in court, and they're being penalized for that. And if that's the standard, this is the first time I've seen it, how are the departments supposed to operate?
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
We did that in budget and finance, and the reason is that's unique is that 3.8 was back pay, and that's why it came out of this salary account. The remaining part of the settlement came out of the litigation account because it fit within there, but it was back pay, and we've done that before.
But it was a lawsuit.
It was a lawsuit, but part of the settlement was back pay, and so we looked at what would be the most appropriate funding, and back pay came out of the salary account, and the other part of the lawsuit came out of the litigation.
Have we done that to other departments?
Yes.
Police department?
Well, I don't know what department we've done that on back pay issues before. So it wasn't the first time.
But if they're sued, if the city is sued, the department is sued, and it's finding that there's fault, whether it's back pay or something else, then we're going to jeopardize them down the road, in this particular case, the EMS captains.
Well,
I have a problem with that.
I don't think the EMS captains are tied to the 3.8.
No, they're not, but they're using that as a way to balance this.
But
And
in reality, no, I think what happened is that when they did last year's budget, the department offered up, because the mayor asked for cuts,
Right.
18 positions, had nothing to do with the settlement. And then when it came to council, we returned the 18 positions. The mayor agreed with the department, cut the 18. We agreed with the department when it came to council and said, you can have the 18, but no funding if you can find the money during the year. Then the lawsuit came up, and we split the difference between the litigation account and the back pay account. In reality, it all washes, because if the department comes up short for the year, the general fund is going to write a check and balance their books. So,
which is what's done all the time. I know the police department's always facing that same situation. So the fire chief says you can fund these, whether it's one-time funding or other funding, and put those captains back.
The proposal that we are making today will not only fund the EMS captains, the ambulances, but 3.8 for the law.
and he's going to have to deal with next year's budget and how he maintains this resource and what other things would go out of the budget to stay within budget. So that's part of the budget process.
Well, maybe there'll be a windfall, because
Yeah.
there's supposed to be one from the federal government. The wind is falling, so is the rain. Anyway, that's all I have. But I support the fire chief on this matter.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I just want to clarify, because I think we gave some different directions at Budget and Finance last week. If we go through the list, the 1.8 is currently in your budget dealing with recruit training. So that's a matter of just shuffling to other accounts.
That's going to, because of the lack of hiring, sending the instructors back to the field, there'll be a savings of 1.8 million.
Okay, but that's money in your budget
Correct.
that you'll just shift amongst your
Correct.
accounts or bodies.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's saved. The other issue, which I didn't understand, on the front of our notes, we show the equipment account surplus at 140, but in the CAO report, you reference is at 127. I'm trying to find out what's the difference.
I met with my budget people. They're telling me it's 140. I'm not sure CAO's
We
numbers.
wrote in the comments up above that we were taking only 127 of the 140, just to make the figures down below come out
Okay,
equal.
but the thing is, so what is that, another 13,000?
Another
What is that?
13,000.
Stay in the equipment account?
Well, that can be moved to some of the other accounts that they have to offset some of that
Right, and then
deficit.
in council, we moved the hydrant money is going into the general fund. The issue of the cap is a general fund item because it's resources we've already paid for.
Now-
I mean, there are people that we funded that went and did the work, and now they're paying us back.
I'm going to give my budget people kind of give an explanation on that. My understanding that what I was saying at the last budget finance meeting may not have been totally accurate. The actual cap is a 2.6 million, and this 5.7 is separate money of
But these are
additional.
positions that are funded already in your budget?
Correct.
And they're merely paying us back?
Correct.
So there's not a double dip that we put them in your budget to spend again?
Right. And my request is not to put it back to the fire department, but to cover the cost
You
of
just identified-
the lawsuit and so forth that really typically would not be in our budget. So we're not
And the
supporting.
1.1 is coming at some point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, on that, is that money was in your budget and was expended, and now this is a reimbursement to the city?
That's correct. We did a national deployment to Texas and Louisiana when the hurricanes occurred down there. Not only paid for the people that were there, but the overtime behind those people, and this is money being reimbursed for the money we spent. As I stated last meeting, our anticipation is supposed to come sometime in February, but even if it's delayed, it'll be this year, but we're not even counting that in the proposal that we're talking about today. We're
Let
not
me just
even
ask the
counting.
other thing that's unclear. When we were at the last budget meeting, I thought what was said is you needed all 18 captain positions. This report is saying 9 between March and the end of the fiscal year.
You're talking about the CAO's report?
Yes.
Yes, I'm in disagreement with the CAO's report. We've identified money to retain all 18, and so my suggestion or request is to retain.
Let me just ask the CEO so we don't get, in the sense of stumbling on this evening because we're out in the community. The game plan for funding for the Budget and Finance Committee, we said basically the monies of the 1.8 is in their budget in which they can, with the CAO, realign that savings. The equipment, we should basically, if they viewed it as surplus, we should move the 140 to the general fund or reserve fund, as stated last week. On the fire hydrant, money's already been moved. The cap and fees that we receive for the service, it's 5 point something, 4.8 or whatever. I think it's 5 point something. Should go to the general fund. When the urban money comes back and reimbursement should go to the general fund. We should fund for them through June 30th, the 18 positions, and that we should not cut the ambulance, the 4 ambulances, and the chief should deal with all of these issues for 09 and 10 as to what the priorities are. But we're going to fund all of that through June 30th.
I agree with all of that except for what you had said on funding all of the 18.
The
These
thing
air-
is that was our commitment, that we're going to fund the 18 of there. We said initially that they would be left in the budget unfunded. During this year, we decided to allow the funding and to keep the ambulances through June 30th. When the chief comes back in 09 and 10, he's going to have to reconcile that these one-time monies we used to fix this year are not available next year, and how he's going to fit that in his priorities.
Correct.
Okay. So if we can get that clarified between now and 6 o'clock, we won't have to go through this discussion again.
Okay, well, as far as this committee's actions are concerned, Mr. Zine and I want to be on record at this committee supporting the position of the mayor, fire chief, and UFLAG. Mr. Parks, how would you like to be recorded for our vote this morning?
Well, I think the issue is that the only change, well, I think we're in support of all of it, except I want to correct the CAO's report that it's 18 positions instead of 9.
So you want to add it to 18 instead of 9?
Yeah, we've already agreed to that.
So we're all in agreement then?
So I hear 3-0?
Yeah.
Okay. That's right, that'll be our action right now.
And that is to approve this, I'm sorry, gentlemen, that's to approve the CAO report?
No.
No?
With amendments, CAO report.
Why don't we ask the mayor's office to state for us the amendment to the CAO report that we will pass as our committee report?
Thank you.
Do you want me to state the?
I want you to state your recommended action, and we
Sure.
will make that our substitute motion for the CAO report.
Okay, so the mayor's office would support adopting the CAO report with the amendment that instead of funding 9 EMS captains March 1 through June 30th, we fund 18 July 1st, 2008 through June 30th, 2009.
There should be any question about the funding? Are we all agree on the funding?
Yeah, the funding, so that there's no misunderstanding, all of that funding that's been identified to go to the general fund, and we will reconcile the fire department's accounts through the financial status reports.
But there was a difference of 13,000 that,
Yeah, but I think we just, 140 should go into the general fund,
okay.
and as opposed to 127. and we'll reconcile their deficits through the year.
Okay. All right, well, great. Thank you all for coming this morning. That'll be the action of the committee. Item 1, our DNA report, is our final item.
Oh, we got 7.
Oh, and then we have 7, my bad.
Item 1, Police Department to present a verbal report relative to the status of DNA testing, backlog, and cold hits, and other DNA-related matters.
Morning, Mr.
Good morning. Greg Matheson, Laboratory Director, Criminalistics Laboratory, LAPD.
Morning, David Diliberto with the Robbery Homicide Division.
Okay, as far as the backlog is concerned, our current total backlog of sexual assault cases is 6,229. That breaks down to 202 that are prioritized by the detectives and 6,027 that were in the previously unrequested backlog. 83 sexual assault kits have been booked into the property division so far this year in 2009. So that's the increase in caseload that's occurred on that. One of the things I'd like to point out, because as a reminder, the cases that are counted in the backlog are ones that have not been completed. All the reports, everything is signed off, but that doesn't give you a feel for what's currently in the pipeline or the progress that's occurring. And to put that in perspective, in 2008, while we were ramping up for the backlog elimination program, 790 kits were outsourced through all of 2008 for this program. Since January 1st of 2009, 525 have gone out. So that reflects the significant increase in the process that is not yet being reflected in the actual backlog numbers.
That's substantial.
Yes.
We've never had anything like that.
No, not at all. This is significantly greater numbers.
From the standpoint of the CODIS hits, we're pretty much keeping the same pace as we had last year. We've had 32 so far this year, which is the exact same number that we had this same time last year. Of those 32 hits, RHD is handling 11 or 34% of them. I'm still actively working on the grant for next year, and I should have some more information for you by next week in terms of the overtime, because I know Councilman Smith had asked, approximately how much money it would be to continue it if the funding didn't dry up. So I'm still working on doing all the catch-up, and I should have a better idea for you next week.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, do you have any questions on this week's DNA report?
No.
Okay, well, we appreciate all the hard work that you and your people in your departments are putting in. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One final matter, Mr. Parks, I think it was implicit, but if you could add your vote to the consent items, then we have a quorum on those. Thank you, Mr. Parks. Okay, Mr. White, you got it? We're done.
Item 7.
Number
Oh,
7.
sorry,
You keep
I
on
have a
forgetting
total
7.
blind spot for item 7. I apologize. I hope someone's here on item 7.
I think it's just here for the committee to consider asking the city attorney's
So
office
when there's no one here, we have Harrietto. Okay.
I'm no one.
All right.
Nobody. Nobody's here, is Harry.
Harry, let me just ask, and hopefully you have the information. On this motion, we're talking about adding burglary as a specific crime, and we're saying much like we do with graffiti and illegal dumping. And when we reworked the ordinance before, what we were trying not to do is come up with a specific crime, because if you add one, then people will say, what about robbery, what about this? What I'm wondering is that, first of all, burglary probably shouldn't be viewed in the same light as graffiti and illegal dumping, because it's a felony. Whether it would satisfy by adding language that said that there are suspects in a Part 1 crime, so that you have some flexibility as it relates to providing a reward. One of the things I was reading the language of the current reward motion, the city attorney gave us advice recently where we had a case where started off as a civil dispute where a father took the child during a divorce hearing. They actually allowed us to use the current ordinance to cover that for a reward. And so I'm just trying to make sure that we don't have to keep coming back, because robbery will be next. We got aggravated assault is involved with resultant injury, but we have other auto theft, whether Part 1 crime would satisfy the issue of expanding the reward motion that gives us the greatest latitude, as opposed to just naming burglary.
Essentially, Chief Beck wasn't able to be here on this item. The department was supportive of Councilmember Gruel's motion, but we can certainly work with the city attorney to come up with an ordinance, and Ms. Gruel's office to come up with an ordinance that might be more encompassing to allow for greater latitude, as you discussed.
Because I just don't think we're going to say burglary, graffiti, and dumping in the same sentence.
All right.
You just did.
I know, but I don't, not on a reward motion.
We'll work with the city attorney's office and Frank come back with something.
Well, thank you for that.
A question I have is, we talk about funding, continuously talk about funding. How much is in the fund, the reward fund? Where does it come from, and can we get any additional dollars added to that reward fund?
It comes from the general fund, and because there's so few that we actually reward, it doesn't make a negative impact on the general.
So we don't have a specific category?
I think there's a category, but I don't think there's any money ever in it. We just come out of the general.
Okay, that's it.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll ask for that ordinance to be drafted. Thank you. No public comment. That's it. Thanks.
Now you get to do more work.